Hello and welcome to Continual. My name is Jean Marie Ward, and tonight on Hot Off the Press, we have five wonderful authors just dying to tell you about their new work. So I'm going to let them get to it. But first, I'm asking them to introduce themselves, starting with John.
Hi, I'm John L. French, retired crime scene investigator, having done 35 plus years on the streets of Baltimore and lived to tell the tale. In fact, I tell the tale a lot. I mainly write, as would be no surprise, crime fiction, but I also delve into horror, paranormal investigation, pulp, some fantasy, and science fiction, depending on what anthology eSpec is putting together at the time.
Great. Okay, Scott.
Okay, I'm J. Scott Coatsworth. I write science fiction, fantasy, and sci-fantasy. I do a little bit of magical realism too. I've published, at this point, 10 books with 3 more on the way, one of which I will talk about tonight, and about 40 stories overall. And yeah, you can find me at jscottcoatsworth.com.
Great. Miski.
Hi, I'm Miski Harris. I now call what I write romantic fiction. Because I don't feel like I fully write in what's the romance genre. I also write a little paranormal. Everything I do is dramatic. My flagship series is based on my 10 plus years in the military. Unfortunately, for many of my friends, we were in during We Better Not Catch You Being Gay and Don't Ask, Don't Tell. So I give all the people in my life their story through that series.
Okay. Joshua.
My name is Joshua Cutchin. I am an author of what I prefer to call speculative nonfiction when I meet a stranger, and that's just a very quaint way of saying that I write books about the paranormal. I recently took the step from successful career writing paranormal books to write my first novel. So that's why I'm here.
Okay, great. We'll look forward to hearing about it. Jay.
Hi everyone, I'm Jay Requard. I'm an author of epic fantasy and sword and sorcery, I'm here tonight to talk about A Dangerous Brew, the first novella in my spy counter killer trilogy. Thank you for having me.
Okay, we're glad to have you, Jay. So let's get that out of the way. Let's talk about this spy killer book.
Spy Counter Killer.
Spy Counter Killer. Okay, tell us a bit about that.
So the story of Spy Counter Killer, starting with the first novella, Dangerous Brew, follows the story of Mina Procronati, who is the former spy mistress and lover of an emperor who's assassinated. When she finds out that he's assassinated, she brings together one of her former friends and one of his former allies, a cartographer who's kind of this dwarf-like character in my fantasy world, and an assassin thief named Keeper to kind of figure out who assassinated the emperor and, of course, bring vengeance to him. I say it's sword and sorcery meets Mission Impossible and later James Bond films, especially the Daniel Craig films, if you're fans of those.
Okay, Scott.
Yeah, so time for the books.
Let's talk about the books. Yeah.
Okay. I have 2 also.
Just give us a brief description. What can we expect? Titles, that sort of thing.
So I have one that's an anthology that I actually have a story in myself. It's called the Writer Save the World series. It's the 3rd one. It's called Transform the World. And it's basically, those little graphics you see that have like the world and it's got like the little solar panels and the little wind stuff and all the stuff sticking off it. It's kind of that idea, but in a book. It's like, what could we do differently in this world, in our society, culture, government, etc., to make the world a better place? And we've got 14 authors that participated, and I've got one story in that. And then the second one is The Gauntlet Runner, which is the second book in my Thrasis Cycles. I call it my 4-book trilogy because it was supposed to be 3 books, and the 3rd book was 150,000 words long and had to be split into 2. But it's basically a sci-fantasy story, a follow-up to The Dragon Eater.
Okay. And I, not being familiar, and one has to assume that folks are not familiar with it, sci-fantasy kind of plot, you know.
Yeah. So basically, the first book opens with one of the main characters, Raven, swallowing a dragon, and it's a small dragon, but it comes out of an egg and goes down his throat and kind of sets the whole thing in motion. It's a world that was colonized about 400 years before from Earth and then got cut off from Earth, and now is kind of a sort of a Renaissance or fantasy feel, but it's a sci-fi basis. And so you have both your dragons and your, kind of fantasy villages and things alongside with an existing AI that came from one of the ships and is one of the character's companions. So in this one, we kind of follow the second part of the series and the second character. The first one was Raven the Thief. And this one is Ake, who is his best friend, who's also bi and would like to be more than his best friend, but he's a guard. And so, a guard and a thief, how's that whole thing going to work together? So yeah, so this book follows him.
Opposites attract, right?
They do, yes, and sometimes with very bad consequences.
Of course. If you don't have bad consequences, you don't have a book, right, John? John?
Right. Still here.
John.
Tell us a little bit about the book you're bringing to us today.
Okay, the book is called Detectives of the Abyss, Murder at Castle Dracula. It is the third book in the Agents of the Abyss series, which was created by Patrick Thomas. The first book was Pat and mine's novel, Frankenstein, Monsters of the Abyss.
Mm-hmm.
The second book was an anthology, and now we have Detectives of the Abyss. Mm-hmm. This world is an alternate to ours. The Martians invaded twice. Once where they were defeated by the cold virus, and secondly by the and then the second time they came, they were prepared for that, but they weren't prepared to come in the middle of a world war, which World War One, which everybody put their differences aside and went after them. Mm-hmm. So you had a world at war with suddenly a new enemy. But that's kind of like the backstory. After that happened, Vlad Tepes, also known as Dracula, managed to acquire quite a bit of Martian technology. And then he acquired Transylvania. So he is now King Vlad of Transylvania. Enter Dr. Jane Watson, daughter of the late John Watson, goddaughter of the still alive Sherlock Holmes. Mm-hmm. And this basically tells her story. She has a few adventures. There's the always popular murder with a will involved. She is the lead in capturing the French criminal Fantomas. And then she deals with a possible ghost, or as her Uncle Sherlock said, nope. In a manor house. Mm-hmm. And then she gets called by Mycroft, who is the M of MI6, mm-hmm. to there's been a murder at Dracula's castle, and King Vlad has requested help. Sherlock says, and Mycroft goes, brother, he's asked for Jane. So she ends up, taking an airship to Transylvania, where she has all sorts of adventures.
Okay. All righty then. Joshua, tell us a little bit about your debut fiction effort.
It's called Them. Oh, it gets blurred out here. I guess it's sort of pointless. It's called Them Old Ways Never Died. It is about a musician who is trapped at home in North Georgia in 2020, and he's in a self-destructive spiral. And as he is sort of battling his own demons, he comes to realize that the property that he is on is not entirely alone. And so through a series of discoveries, both with some of his old friends and some new acquaintances, they find out that what is happening to him has implications for both. It comes from his past, but also has profound implications for his future. It's a story that spans about, I think, 123 years. And so, it starts in Ireland and moves to Appalachia. And I really wanted to incorporate a lot of the folklore that I've learned in writing my nonfiction, supernatural, and paranormal books. And I'll go ahead and spoil a little bit here. The antagonists are the Fey folk, and there's a lot of, I have felt personally that there's a lot of fairy fiction that doesn't really hew very close to the folklore. So the idea was to create something that not only expressed a lot of what I went through in 2020, but also something that would sort of capture in the most faithful way some of that folklore and put it into sort of a American folk horror setting.
Okay, cool, very cool. Okay, Miski, you've got 2 books as well. Let's tell us a little bit about them.
The first one is called Midnight in the Renaissance Elevator. It's an anthology, and basically I attend a con almost every year called Gay Romance Literature. We've twice been to the Renaissance Hotel in Portsmouth, Virginia. And in spite of the span of time between those 2 visits, there's this one elevator that seems to have never been fixed. And so instead of gliding shut, it slams shut. Last year, after almost getting the involuntary mastectomy from this thing, I decided, we've all had some strange experiences with this elevator, and maybe we should put it in a book. I kind of threw it out there, and the next thing I knew, I had 30 authors say, I want in. So I took a deep breath and waded in. So you have, basically now there are 29 stories. Each one is different. I've read them all, no 2 are alike. My particular story is called Ride with the Wraith. Do not ask me why I wrote a story involving a pissed off ghost, since I don't like to read horror. And I actually had night terrors after I pressed play on the end of this book. But I think the 2 things that have made it popular is, one, there's something in it for everybody. Mm-hmm. Whatever it is you like to read, I guarantee you there's a story in that anthology for you. The second thing is, every dollar made through Amazon is being donated to the Trevor Project, to include about $400 left over from the money we put together for expenses. And every author said, I don't need my half back. So we made that first donation when I discovered the budget was going to be so small. So between supporting a worthy cause and being very entertaining, I honestly believe that this is a work for everybody. My second book is, as Scott says, it's book 3 of the trilogy that's about to have a 4th book. Don't Ask, Don't Tell is a series that started out as 1 book, but because I'm crazy, my characters talk to me and they just won't let me put the pen down. A continuing figure in this series is a character named Teddy. Everybody that has read Don't Ask, Don't Tell or Collateral Damage has fallen in love with Teddy. Teddy is a counselor for our veterans, and he moonlights as a drag queen. This is Teddy's story. I will not, I can't, it's hard for me to explain the story and not give it away. I like the fact that when Teddy makes his revelation, everybody goes, "What?" So my editor called it the book of my heart. I think so too, because I finally revealed to the world that Teddy is based on a real character. I dedicated the book to the real Teddy. I grew up in the LGBTQ community, even though I am a flaming hetero, and I was in the village during Stonewall. Of course, I was a teenager. I didn't truly understand what was going on, because in New York City, if there's trouble, you get your ass on a train and go home. And pretty much that's what I did. But I was there long enough to have an appreciation for what happened. So, and it constantly shows up in my reviews. I really work hard to, while being dramatic and fictional and romantic, but I think people need an appreciation of what actually goes on in the lives of these men. And that's it.
Hey, cool. What was the most surprising thing to you as a writer about writing Teddy's story and putting together your anthology? You know, you've already said that you frightened yourself with your story in the anthology, but what was the most surprising thing about the anthology as a whole?
That I could get 30 people to do what I told them to do, and they were all authors. The other thing that really surprised me was the anthology made me aware of how many people actually know who I am. And wow, there are people on this planet that I've never met, like Scott, who think I'm a good person. And when I said this is what I'm doing, they were like, "I'm in, how can I help you?" That really blew my socks off. You know, lately, especially on social media, everything's been so negative, that the positivity that came out of this, on release day, we had 775 pre-orders. I stopped looking at the revenue, because it's the gift we give Trevor is really blowing me away. In Damage Controlled, revealing Teddy's secret was kind of a release for me. You know, people think it's easy to be an ally. It's not, because it means standing up to people who you love, who love you, who've done you no harm, but you won't let them harm other people that you've come to love. I'm a mixed race woman, so while I'm not gay or lesbian or any of the other letters, as far as I can figure, I have an intense appreciation for the LGBTQ experience, and that's why I came to writing MM anyway. I write MM because most of the people I know, get along with, and who can tolerate me are male. I'm being very good on this, because I can make sailors cry with my mouth. But I was raised by a lesbian, and in the 50s to be out was insanity. It wasn't courageous. You were crazy, because it was against the law in New York until 2012. So I try to bring that realism to my stories, especially Don't Ask, Don't Tell, which is my military series, because I find with each book, somebody writes a review about how much they did not know that they learned. So, Scott, maybe I'm changing the world a book at the time, a person at the time, but
Yes.
to discover that people actually read. My books are written for people who read. You know, they will entertain you. I have a very dramatic side, and I have a weird sense of humor. But if you read my books, you're going to learn something you didn't know. And so I guess what surprises me is that people actually like that and keep buying my books. My reviews are starting to say, I've read books 1 and 2, and
Nice.
Oh, cool. Very cool.
Oh,
Okay.
as an actual fairy, I want to bestow upon you with my magic wand, which is actually just a paintbrush, but the title of Honorary Queer.
thank you.
You heard it here,
accept.
folks.
I accept. Thank you.
Okay. Joshua, what about you? What surprised you writing fiction, writing your first novel?
Well, it's kind of interesting because in some ways it was a surprise, but it was also what I was hoping for. I like Miski had characters talking to me. So I've obviously had a long-standing interest in the paranormal and the supernatural, but all of my experiences you can pretty much fit inside a thimble. And when I go looking for them, they don't tend to come out of the woods or out of the sky or anything like that. So I decided that I was going to embark on this quest of fulfilling something that I'd often believed, but hadn't really experienced myself, which is this very Carl Jung-esque idea of people don't have ideas, ideas have people. Like there are these ideas that just sort of come to you from out of the ether. And I had always spoken with author friends of mine, like Jim Nettles, and they'd always told me that this is a thing. Like your characters will come to you and tell you what to do and what not to do. And I'll be darned, that's exactly what happened. And it was very surprising and quite uncanny to have it happen. And it wasn't just that I had ideas sort of come to me, it's that they came to me and they were, I mean, this is not me passing quality on my own work, but for what I wanted to do, the ideas that came to me were just right on perfect. And they would often come on the cusp between sleepfulness and wakefulness, right there in the middle, which was actually really obnoxious for a while, because I had to keep a pen and paper beside the bed. I'm sure a lot of y'all have had that exact same thing happen, but yeah, it was really uncanny how I would start falling asleep with a problem in my head and I'd forget about it, and then just out of nowhere, like a lightning bolt, it would just sort of come to me and fix a problem that I had. Similarly, when I was working with my editor and went back to do some rewrites, there was a section, I didn't have anything too substantial to do, but there was one chapter with an introduction of a character that was just a little bit too expository and whatnot. And I had sort of sensed that at the time. And when I did the rewrite, it didn't feel like I was reworking anything. It felt like I had garbled the transmission the first time, if that makes any sense. It's like, oh no, this is the way it was always supposed to be, and I transcribed it wrong. So there was very much that sort of an experience. And there's this famous example of, well, there are several famous examples of authors sort of meeting their characters in real life. Alan Moore, famous comic book writer, supposedly claims that he met John Constantine, and Neil Gaiman's had a similar experience as well. Some others that don't really strike me. I didn't quite have that happen, but I'm not sure I didn't. There's a character, my protagonist, his name is Rick, and he has a best friend named Bora, and she works at a pharmacy. And I went to one of my pharmacies and I pulled up to the drive-through, and there was this person that looks just like I had Bora in my head there at the drive-through. And she was actually what her outfit later informed an outfit that Bora was going to wear. But I haven't been back to that pharmacy to check if she actually works there or if she was, a spirit from my imagination. But it was one of those things where it just sort of. So those were the most surprising things, is that I would say, quasi-spiritual, supernatural quality of where these ideas come from, and also how like these things tended to bleed into my life a little bit more. It really was a way that I sort of ended up re-enchanting my life to a degree, as it were. So
cool.
yeah, that was super surprising. So I sort of treated it as an on-demand supernatural experience, and I don't know if that's what it was, but for me, it served that purpose. So that was by far the most surprising thing that I'd noticed.
And fun.
Oh, yeah.
Welcome to the dark side.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. They talk to us. They drive us crazy. Yes. Anyway, Jay, tell us about your book and whether or not you had characters driving you crazy.
I didn't have any characters driving me crazy. I think the thing that I learned the most writing this book in this series was I do a lot of reading, like of fiction outside of the thing that I'm working on. So this was a lot of espionage and spy fiction. So a lot of Tom Clancy, a lot of Ian Fleming, a lot of Requard, kind of a lot of the classic espionage authors. And in the process of like learning how to, I guess, pace in a way that a thriller novel is paced, I really kind of learned the ins and outs of like beat making again in my writing, which was a lot of fun. I also got to work with a different sort of editor this time, who was not very familiar with sword and sorcery, but they were very familiar with thrillers and crime novels. And being able to have them there and like kind of help me along with the pacing, while at the same time understanding that there's a sense of like how we do action in fantasy versus how you have to do action in things like thrillers, crime novels, spy novels. And I think I really learned like how to make violent interactions between characters have like real maximum impact and a minimum amount of words, which is something that like spy and thriller novels do very, very well. But also I learned kind of really to like have fun with the details. I think one thing that makes spy and thriller novels a lot of fun, especially the more technical ones, is that you have to have a certain amount of believability in the things everyone's using, and actually putting time and effort to figure those things out, like the gadgets and the tools and the weapons that they were using. That was a really cool learning experience to really kind of have to sit down and hash out.
Cool. John, what was the most surprising thing for you about the current novel?
Okay. I had, I was setting something in Dracula's castle. And first of all, I learned there are a lot of castles in that area that are said to be Dracula's castle. And I looked them all, I read about them all, and decided, nah, it's going to be Dracula's castle. It's going to be the one that Jonathan Harker escaped from, in the novel. Because, I mean, if he's got 5, what's... But then, I did, I wanted to, according, in Pat's universe, Transylvania is the haven for monsters and creatures and anything that's different. So there's going to be a lot of what we in this world regard as supernatural. All right, which means there's going to be various monsters. So I decided the castle was going to be filled with vampires, and there was going to be a werewolf. And I wanted I knew who the vampires were. There was a lot of vampire fiction, both before and after Bram Stoker. But I wanted to, I was going to put a werewolf in. And I learned there was hardly any werewolf fiction around the time Bram Stoker was writing
Right.
Dracula. There were a lot of legends,
Mhm.
you know, Stump Peter and all that. And there was a really cool con game, which I won't disclose because it was too cool not to put in the book,
Mhm.
that involves werewolves. So I had to come up with my own werewolf, you know, and then but and as far as I'm used to the characters living dead. In fact, if I could find a way, I'd charge them rent. But I had to. There was a joke that I wanted to put. Having already written about Victor Frankenstein and Victor's creation, whom Pat and I decided it would take the name Adam Frankenstein.
Mhm.
You know, I was going to have Jane Watson go into the library of Dracula's castle. There, Adam Frankenstein would be sitting, reading, a cat on his lap,
Mhm.
and he would be listening to an instrumental version of the Ritz.
Mhm.
For all you young Frankenstein
Fans, yes.
Yes, so, you know, and that was just going to be, he was just going to be there. I did not expect what happened with Adam Frankenstein until I realized it was going to happen, and then I just went. A lot of that, yeah, a lot of that happened. You know, Jane picks up an ally inside Castle Dracula. There were far more murders than I thought there would be, but the ending was pretty much what I expected. And how the One Ring found its way into the book, I just don't. I don't know. It was supposed to be a throwaway gimmick in like the third chapter, and all of a sudden, the One Ring and a certain requesting that a certain English professor who requested that his name not be used in any of Sherlock or Jane's journals, you know, is involved. Yes, the One Ring just showed as it tends to.
As it does, as it does.
Yes, so that's, you know, those are my adventures in learning things. Oh, and before I forget, this is what the book looks like.
Okay, cool. Very
Pat
cool.
Thomas did the cover.
Oh, okay. Great. Okay, Scott, what were the surprises that you learned working in, you know, in your anthology and in the novel?
Well, first, I just want to say to John, please tell me that a Martian gets turned by a vampire at some point in the stories.
No, but there's a couple more anthologies coming. It could happen.
Okay.
Okay, we want a Martian vampire. I'm just saying.
Now, there's
100%, yep.
there's Martian technology. I'll just spoil it a little bit. There's Martian technology in the book, but I'm leaving the actual Martians, those that remain, to the other writers who are contributing to the anthologies.
Or a Martian human Frankenstein would also work for me.
Pardon?
Martian human Frankenstein would also work for me.
No, but let me just say, what happens with Adam Frankenstein is, well, I wasn't expecting it. Oh, and by the way, Jane Watson my mind was patterned after Mrs. Emma Peel.
Oh.
Okay. So
you know she's a badass.
I'm just saying that if Martians can catch a cold, they can be bitten by vampires.
Absolutely. Yep.
And we want a Martian vampire.
yes.
Well, I'll bring that up with Pat.
At the next committee meeting, yes.
Yes.
So so what surprised me, on the Transform the World, that's this pretty little book here. This was, like I said, the third one in the series, and the first one I think we got 50 stories. The second one we got about 75. This one surprised me because we got 150, which in some anthologies is not a lot, but when you are like the one person doing the anthology and you're not doing a Kickstarter and you have to figure out how to get through 152 stories, it was a surprise. So I at a friend's suggestion, I found a bunch of other friends that agreed to be screeners on the stories and had every story screened by 2 screeners and used that and pretty much went by their recommendations. There were some stories that were by authors that had been in the first and or the second one. And even if they didn't quite make the muster, I still read their story because I wanted, to give them the courtesy of doing that since they'd already been in before. I don't necessarily give somebody the position in the anthology because they've been in the previous one, but they do kind of get popped to the top of the list to look at.
Yeah.
So that was my surprise for that one. For the Gauntlet Runner and the series in general, on the sci-fantasy series, the Thoracic Cycle, so that's Guy That Swallowed Dragon here, and then Guy That Swallowed Dragon here. And I don't have the actual book yet. It's coming next week. The thing that surprised me there was I was writing it just at I will say at the end of the before times. I started it in January of 2020, and I had planned to write one book and then send it off to where I was going to do it, either myself, self-publish it, or find a publisher, and then do the next one. And so I had it off to my editor, and my editor came back and said, well, first of all, this is actually a YA novel. This is not an adult science fiction, science fantasy book, because you're dealing with protagonists that are all coming of age or kind of coming into their own. This is a YA story. And I was like, okay, I can deal with that. Let me think about it. I can deal with that. And then second, you've actually written the first 2 parts of the 3 parts of the story in this one book. And so all you have to do, famous last words, all you have to do is write the 3rd part. So I said, okay. So I went back and sat with that for a while and decided, okay, I'm going to call it a YA adult crossover because it really is appropriate for both audiences. And I split it into 2 books and kind of worked it out a little bit, made them each one a little longer. And then I went to write the last one, and then the last one ended up being way longer. And then in June 30th of last year, the day before I was supposed to go to Baycon, I flew off my bike, flew 15 feet in the air, and landed on my shoulder. And I basically exploded my humerus right here. And ended up going to the con the next day because my doctor said I could, as long as I wasn't hurting too much. But I just decided I wasn't in the place to publish it, to self-publish it. So when I was there, I met a great guy, Stephen Radecki at Water Dragon Publishing. And a few days later, I pitched him on the story, and he said, send it on over, I'll take a look. And he loved the story and said, I'd be happy to work with you on it. So it is it's trad published, but it's kind of also a weird sort of hybrid thing between the 2 of us because I'm so used to the control that I get being an indie author. So I kind of insist on more of that than he's usually, willing to give people. But yeah, then we had the 3 books ready to go, and I said to him, this last one's got to be 2 books. Can we do a contract for a 4th? So it's now a 4-book trilogy, and the nice thing is it's all completely done. And so I just have to do edits as they come in, and I've got books scheduled out and through October of next year, every 6 months a book. So
wonderful.
There you go.
How's the shoulder?
Oh, the shoulder is great, actually. I have some cadaver bone in me, which the horror and paranormal people enjoy. I also have 12 screws and 2 plates in this one to match the 12 screws and the 2 rods in my ankle from a previous accident, not on a bike. And I have recovered in the 95th percentile, or I guess top 5 percentile of people that recover from this kind of thing. So,
wow,
I'm glad you have to wrap you in bubble wrap.
that was suggested, especially at the con. And Mark went with me, my husband, and he kept making me stop and sit down and not lift things. And he's a very good husband. So.
Well, I'm glad he was taking care of you because it sounds like you can't do it yourself.
Okay.
24 screws. That makes me hurt just thinking about it.
I just feel like every year there's a post from you about something else that needs to be repaired.
Well, I've only broken twice. So then that was actually a good 15, 18 years apart. So, but yeah, I am basically the bionic man now without the strength.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, the bionic man, it just doesn't work quite like that.
Yeah, I want to make that noise when I run, and it just doesn't happen.
And that slow motion run,
That's how you know it's working.
Anyway, okay, what do you
back far enough? It goes pop. So anyway, there's that.
there's that. But you know, pop is not quite the same thing as the musical accompaniment and all that. Um, what do you want folks to take away from these two books?
So I write what's called Hope Punk, and we had a big talk about this at Bacon. Hope Punk, at its most kind of tight definition, is basically like cyberpunk. You've got a group of renegades, but they're trying to change the world in a hopeful way. At a wider lens version of it, it's basically fiction, especially speculative fiction, that ends with some kind of hopeful note, hopeful tone. Things are going to get better, even if though, and there often is darkness on the way to get there. So both of these things, the writer's State of the World is basically about, we can do something about climate change. We can do something about the way our society works. We can do something about all these things in the world. And here's some fictional worlds that are really cool stories that show you how that might be done. And mine also, my two, well, my four ultimately books. Again, there's a darkness in this world, but it ultimately is about hope and what's going to happen at the end. So things are going to get better, even though these characters have to go through a lot of stuff to get there. So,
Okay, so it's hope. Okay, Miski, what about you? What do you want folks to take away from from the anthology, from your story in the anthology, and from the new novel?
I want the same thing every time I send a book out into the world. It actually offends my sensibilities that when you say you write people automatically think, oh, it's smut. It's erotic. Romance and sex are mutually exclusive. I can tell you from experience, I've had sex with people that I did not love, never would love, and to this day, I'm glad I didn't love. But love is different. And so in my books, I really try to portray that relationship. To that end, there is no on-page sex in any book that I have ever written or will ever write. And people are buying my books, so somebody agrees with me. Each time I hope to reach one more person. I would like the romance genre to just be free of the need to have explicit, anatomically impossible sex on pages. I'm a nurse, and I can tell you that some of these things are not possible with the male anatomy. Yep. Just saying. But I'd like to be rid of that. I'd like us to be able to have stories that are good because of the story, not judged good because there's a hot sex scene on every chapter. So that's the takeaway that I try to give.
Okay. Jay, what about you? What do you want folks to take away from the current book?
I think what I want folks to take away from Spy Counter Killer and all three of these novellas it's just a sense of fun. Like I said, it's James Bond and Mission Impossible meets Sword and Sorcery, and I don't think that it has to be any more complicated than that. I think if you really just enjoy high action fantasy and fun characters, and of course a dragon shows up, I think people will be into that. So just having fun and escapism. I think at some point people just want a lot of escapism, especially these days. So I tried to give them that in these three books.
Okay, great. There are no wrong answers, by the way. I'm just curious. Okay, John, what do you want folks to take away from Jane Watson's adventures in Castle Dracula?
Okay, like Jay said, I just want them to have a good time reading.
Amen.
I mean, there's lots of adventures. Jane does a lot of things, and thank God I made her a doctor because she gets to do a couple of there. But I just want them to have a good time reading it. And if somewhere along the line they say, I don't believe they did that. That's just a bonus, and I think that's for this kind of book, I think that's all you can ask for. Just give somebody a good adventure where, they're kind of pulled along, and next thing you know, it's 2 o'clock in the morning and they go, I should get to bed, but I'm so close.
We
to
don't
it.
want to.
One more page.
Just one more page.
Chapter, I can do it.
My favorite comment on any book is, oh yeah, I had to keep reading one more page, just one more page. What about you, Joshua? What do you want folks to take away from?
I suppose a couple of things. One thing that I've run into in my nonfiction output, again, depending on your belief in the paranormal, maybe it's not nonfiction, but one thing I've run into in those other books that I've done so far is that there's this really strong impulse for people who are into this stuff to really keep things siloed off into respective categories. You've got your ghosts over here, you've got your cryptids over here, you've got your UFO stuff over here. And I wanted to shake all that up in a big way, and to sort of make those different, seemingly disparate topics cross-pollinate a bit and get people thinking about that. So that's sort of that's the superficial answer, I guess. But the other thing that I really wanted to do was, I am a musician as also, and I had some alcoholism problems come to a head during 2020, and so it's not much of a surprise that my protagonist is going through the same thing. But I just feel like there was a lot to memorialize about that year, and I know it's just 3 years later, but I feel like some of us, myself included, sometimes feel like it was just a bad dream, and we sort of forget the way that felt. And I felt like that needed to be sort of, for me, distilled and sort of preserved in amber. I am lucky enough as a musician and an author that I was able to sort of, dive into my writing and focus on that a little bit more to keep myself preoccupied. But I have a lot of musician friends who were just absolutely wrecked by the lack of opportunities to perform, both on a financial level and on, sort of a deeper spiritual level, because these are people who, eat, breathe, sleep, and drink music. And so that's sort of what the protagonist goes through. And I sort of wanted to have it be a bit of an elegy for those who went through similar things, and not just musicians, but all of us who went through those things. And that's sort of the other takeaway. And tied in with that, as I alluded to, are themes of recovery and redemption, and how it's never too late to turn. When you realize that you're walking down the wrong road, it's never too late to turn back around and head back. So those are the main 3 or so things that I'd really like to see people take away from it.
Cool. Unfortunately, we're coming up to the end of our hour together. So before we do, however, I would like everyone to let folks know where they can find your book and where they can find you on the web. So starting again with you, Joshua, please.
You can find everything you want to know about me. If you're a true masochist, I have all my interviews listed there too, so you can listen to me 24 hours a day for several weeks. At joshuacutchin.com, JOSHUACUTCHIN.com. Them Old Ways Never Died is self-published, but I do offer signed copies that you can contact me directly through my website, and we'll get a copy sent directly to you.
Okay, and do you have any socials and links to that on your website as well?
I do. Yeah, I'm not on Twitter. I gave up that vice a long time ago, but I am on Facebook. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. Jay, where can folks find the book, and where can they find you?
So everyone can find A Dangerous Brew on Amazon right now. It's actually in pre-order. You can find me at jrequard.com, and you can find me basically anywhere on social media at jrequard at this point. I will probably be leaving Twitter very soon because it is descending into the 9th ring of hell. But once we get there. But thank you so much for having me.
Okay, our pleasure. John.
Hey, you can find my books and Patrick Thomas's books on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. I'm on Facebook. Oh, by the way, if you look for me on either Amazon or Barnes and Noble, please like John L. French, along with, if you can, one of the titles of my books. Otherwise, you will get books on literature. You will get books en français. You will get everything but the books of John L. French. So, please include like Detectives of the Abyss or Wages of Sin or something that I've written that'll take you to my Amazon page. As far as where else you can find the book, if this comes out before Monster Mania in Hunt Valley, probably the last convention at that hotel, which is in October, then you'll find me there. If not, I'll be at the Frederick Comic Con in November and in the Ocean City Comic Con the second Saturday of December.
Okay. And do you have a website or
No.
are you okay? But you are on Facebook, right?
I am on Facebook.
Okay, great. Scott.
Sure. So my name is one of the hardest easy names in the world. So I'm going to hold up a visual aid. So it is literally Coatsworth. But I say it and I talk fast, so people get like all different kinds of strange things. But how much are your coats worth? It's about the easiest way to remember it. So I am at jscottcoatsworth.com. I was also on Twitter and left that hellhole back in November, although technically it's still on there because I wanted to hold my space so nobody else steals it and pretends to be me. My main hangs are Facebook and on Mastodon, and I absolutely freaking love Mastodon. It's like what Facebook was back in like 2008. It's friendly, it's supportive, it's all kinds of interactions and stuff. So the last thing, if you want to find me in person, I'm in Sacramento, so I do a lot of events here, but I also do BayCon every year, which is now in Santa Clara. So that'll be coming up in beginning of July next year. So if you are in California and you head to BayCon, I will be there.
Okay,
So,
and the
thank you.
books are available where?
Oh, thank you. So you always have to remind me of these things. They are wide. So all of my titles are basically at all vendors pretty much across the board: Smashwords, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Kobo, any other ones I can imagine. Bookshop, if you want to get a bookshop.org, if you want to get it locally. So yeah, anywhere you look for me, you can find me.
Okay, and Miski, you get the second to the last word. Where can folks find all the books, and where can they find you?
A great many of my books are wide, so they are at all the ebook offenders, Barnes and Noble, and Amazon, Kobo, etc. Damage Controlled, ironically, is at Walmart. I always say that one because it still surprises me. If you want to find me online, my website is miskiharris.com. And then basically, if you go to linktree.com, you find all my other social media spaces. Like everyone else, you'll find my Twitter page, but I have given up tweeting because I believe hell is a real place and it now exists online.
Yes.
Personally, if you're in Perryville, Ohio, you'll find me at Authors and Dancers Against Cancer book signing. And if you're overseas, if we do this that far, I will be in Blackpool, the UK. I'm really excited about this because I was invited to appear there with the Indie Pride book signing. It's the very first one, and it's going to be in Blackpool in March.
You're famous, yay!
Congratulations!
I'm
That's
serious.
wonderful.
I feel like screaming. They like me. They really,
Really, really like me.
We'll be bringing your crown out shortly.
Oh, I already have one because I was a dragon goddess at Literary Love Savannah, so I now have a crown.
I wanted to
Even
share one
better.
with Jay.
Oh, and I forgot for local people this weekend, I am going to be off in the woods. Martinsville, Virginia. You can probably hear the banjos playing. I'm dragging Amy Wasp with me and my emotional support granddaughter. But I am going to be at Martinsville Loves Books.
Oh, okay.
I will be appearing at dinner. My dinner table was sold out. I'm like freaking out. But I will be appearing in my Harry Potter garb as Hermione Granger.
Yay! I can see that. So, Jay, I wanted to share one thing that a fan sent to me. I thought you might appreciate.
Oh, nice.
I actually do not know who sent this to me. It came to me in the mail, and nobody has ever fessed up to sending it. But it came right after the Dragon Eater was released. So,
Oh, how cute.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
That is
lovely.
so cool.
Thank you.
And you had me at Dragon. When we're done, I need to get the name of that book.
Yay! I'll talk to you.
Okay, great. Well, thank you all for being such great salespeople of your own work. It was a pleasure working with you tonight. And thank you out there for joining us at ConTinual. Looking forward to seeing you next time.